You know that LeBron, Wade, Bosh, and what's going to happen with the Miami Heat will get a lot of attention this offseason, but it won't be the only major storyline for the NBA in the weeks and perhaps months to come. Carmelo Anthony and where he's going to decide to go in free agency is going to be another storyline that plays out in the days and weeks to come for sure. When you look at Carmelo Anthony, this is an important, potentially career altering decision that he faces. You talk about a player now that's 30 years of age. He's been in the league 11 seasons. Just think about that for a second. He's one of the real star players in the NBA, but he also knows, too, that the situation that he's in New York, the Knicks are a mess, and they are nowhere near contending for a championship, and he knows that. And he knows they're in a bad way. And he knows that at 30 years of age that he has this opportunity perhaps, and only this opportunity perhaps, to find a great situation for himself, both financially and also in terms of potentially contending for and winning an NBA championship, that he needs to take his time and weigh out all of his options before he ultimately makes that plunge. Now, it's important to understand that, you're talking about him being able to choose his options. This might be the last major contract for him, because whether he signs a 4-year or a 5-year deal, you're talking about a guy at the end of that next contract could be 34, 35 years of age, and who's going to want to devote $25 million or something a year to a guy that's going to be 35 years of age that will have had at that point in time 16 to 17 NBA seasons of mileage on his body. It's also important to understand, too, he has to weigh out the thoughts of winning a championship versus the thoughts of making as much money as he possibly can, because the Knicks can give him more money, up to $33 million more than another team can in free agency. So it's a big decision, an important decision for Carmelo Anthony, one that could really affect the landscape of the NBA. Now, let's look at some of the teams where he could potentially go, or where he should go, or where he shouldn't go. We'll start off with the New York Knicks. They can pay him more money than anybody else because of the Larry Bird rule, because of him already having been with the team. They have the ability to offer him up to 5 years and $129 million, whereas any other team, if they just signed him outright in free agency, can only offer him a maximum contract of 4 years and $95.9 million. So you're talking about a little over $33 million in difference to re-sign with the New York Knicks. They've got Phil Jackson there. Maybe they're going to get into a position where after next season they can go after a free agent or two, clear up some salary cap space, and really build a championship contending team around him. Carmelo Anthony seems to enjoy playing in New York. So there is some appeal there potentially. But if you are really motivated by winning a championship, is New York going to be the best option for you next season, or frankly even 3 or 4 seasons down the road? I don't think so. You look at a team like the LA Lakers. Talk about playing in LA, playing in Hollywood, playing with Kobe Bryant. Sounds great in theory until you realize Kobe Bryant, isn't the easiest guy to play with. Furthermore, you're talking about a team that Kobe's under contract for maybe 2 more seasons, and his play is definitely going to decline at his age, and there's not a lot of infrastructure, a lot of pieces around him. So not only can the Lakers not give you the most money, they definitely don't offer you the best chance to legitimately contend for a championship, especially jumping to the Western Conference. So why would a Carmelo Anthony go there? So I don't think the Knicks are a realistic option. Neither are the Lakers. I think there are 4 teams that are the most realistic options for Carmelo Anthony. I'll start off with the Miami Heat. There could be a lot of appeal there to go join his buddies, his pals from that 2003 great draft class of LeBron James and Dwyane Wade and Chris Bosh. He sees what they've been able to accomplish. He sees the fact that over the past 4 seasons, they've made it to 4 straight NBA finals. They've won 2 NBA championships and still made quite a decent amount of money. And maybe he understands, Carmelo, at this point in time, that his legacy, could be really molded here by this decision, and maybe he wants something like what they have, and he wants, with all the money he's already made, well over $100 million in his career, maybe he wants to go win a championship. Maybe he wants to be a part of a championship environment. He wants to go play with these guys like LeBron, Wade, and Bosh, and maybe there's a lot of appeal there. But the problem is, if you're a Carmelo Anthony, it's one thing to sit there and sacrifice maybe $30 million to sit there and chase a championship. But in order to provide the Miami Heat with the financial flexibility they would need in order to, bring in other pieces and other young talent to augment that roster to go with you and LeBron and Wade and Bosh, you're talking about him probably having to take a cut of another 30, 40, 50 million dollars. Is he really willing to do that? Why sit there and play for 10 to 12 million a year under your last perhaps major contract when you could play for 18 or 20 million a year or more? And you look at Wade and Bosh, they're going to want at least 10 million a year. LeBron's going to want max money, which is going to be well over 20 million a year. As a result, the Heat would have to blow up into luxury tax territory, $20, $30 million worth, just to even assemble a team that would really legitimately be a championship contender. Furthermore, you talk about Carmelo going there. You talk about the fit. This is a guy with, again, a lot of NBA mileage on his body. He's not the youngest player. And you're talking about a guy who doesn't offer much on the defensive side and offensively has to dominate the ball in order to really be able to make himself involved and have an impact on the game, which might not be the best thing for a LeBron James-led team. So I question the fit there. A surprise team to many might be the Dallas Mavericks. I look at a team with a great owner in Mark Cuban, a star player, Hall of Famer in Dirk Nowitzki, who desperately wants a chance at another championship at 36 years of age, a guy who is very willing, it seems like, to take less money in order to clear up enough space for the Dallas Mavericks to make a big move, to bring in somebody like a Carmelo Anthony. You're talking about him going from a New York to a Dallas, a huge market, but not the size of New York. You can play in a lower pressure environment, play on a team that is still really damn good, that wouldn't have to sell off a lot of pieces in order to pay Carmelo Anthony a lot of money and bring him in. And this is a Mavericks team that did take the NBA champion Spurs, who kicked the shit out of the Heat in the finals, to 7 games in the opening round of the Western Conference playoffs. So you're talking about a Mavericks team that, with a big-time impact perimeter scorer like a Carmelo Anthony, might be able to potentially get over that hump. There's some championship appeal there, and he could still get paid a lot of money. Two of the favorites right now, obviously, are the Chicago Bulls and the Houston Rockets. They could both get creative and bring him in at a big contract, and it would seem to be a big boon to either one of those teams and their championship chances. When you look at the Bulls, when you say Carmelo Anthony, do you want to go play in the Western Conference or do you want to play in the Eastern Conference? And where is your easiest path potentially to a championship? It's probably in the Eastern Conference. Therefore, the Bulls have a bit of an advantage. They have a nice core nucleus there with guys like Joakim Noah, guys like Jimmy Butler, guys like, if he's able to come back healthy, guys like a Derrick Rose, an all-star caliber player. But you look at it, and if you're Carmelo, you say, other than the fact that you play in a weak Eastern Conference, and maybe that would be enough to get you at least to the NBA Finals where you would have a shot at winning a championship, what else do the Bulls really have? And is Rose actually going to be healthy? And even if he is, bringing me in, is that going to be enough to actually be a championship contending team? I don't know. And then you look at the Houston Rockets. You would sit there and say, well, they've already got 2 established stars in James Harden and Dwight Howard. But you look at it, in order to bring in a Carmelo Anthony, they'd have to get rid of Chandler Parsons. They have to trade off Jeremy Lin. They've already traded off Omer Asik. How many other pieces would the Houston Rockets actually have in place in order to be able to bring in a third big dollar contract that a Carmelo Anthony would bring to the table? What type of nucleus would there be around him? And Carmelo would have to sit there and look at what he saw with the Miami Heat and say, yeah, they had 3 stars, and they really didn't have shit else around him, and they got steamrolled. And you look at the Rockets, if that was the case, they could get steamrolled, especially in the Western Conference playoffs, to the point where they wouldn't even make it to the NBA Finals. And then you look at the fit, too, of you're talking about playing with a James Harden, a guy that's going to dominate the ball. And then you're going to talk about a guy like a Dwight Howard who's going to bitch about not getting the ball if he doesn't get the ball enough. And it could potentially be an unmitigated disaster. So where should Carmelo Anthony go ultimately? Shit. Who knows? Because some of the more appealing options, in theory, seem to have just as many potential negatives associated with him going there. If he wants the most money, if that's what he's motivated by, if he wants more money and he wants to get the most he possibly can, and he loves playing in the big city spotlight of New York, and he believes that Phil Jackson ultimately will build a championship team around him in the next couple of seasons, then just stay in New York and, take your chances and roll the dice and hope for the best. If he does want to contend for a championship relatively soon, then frankly, it's probably better off that he goes to the Dallas Mavericks or the Chicago Bulls, even though I really don't want him anywhere near my Bulls. I'm just saying. I want to know what you think, though. Where do you think Carmelo Anthony will go? Where do you think Carmelo Anthony should go? Let me know in the comments below.